So we're reading today from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 9, entitled The Most Confidential Knowledge, verses 24 and 25. So there's two verses and two purports. We'll just do the Mangalacharana before we begin. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyanjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Darati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakavanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavanscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we'll read both verses, their translations, and the purports. It's kind of unusual for me to speak on two purports at the same time. So let's see how we'll do it. I think we'll do it bit by bit. That makes sense. Aham hi sarvasya yajnanam bhokta cha prabhureva cha natumam abhijananti tattvena dasyavantite. So that's 24. And the translation is, I am the only enjoyer and master of all sacrifices. Therefore, those who do not recognize my true transcendental nature fall down. In purport. Here it is clearly stated that there are many types of yajna performances recommended in the Vedic literatures, but actually all of them are meant for satisfying the Supreme Lord. Yajna means Vishnu. In the 3rd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly stated that one should only work for satisfying Yajna or Vishnu. The perfectional form of human civilization known as Varnashram Dharma is specifically meant for satisfying Vishnu. Therefore Krishna says in this verse, I am the enjoyer of all sacrifices because I am the Supreme Master. Less intelligent persons, however, without knowing this fact, worship demigods for temporary benefit. Therefore they fall down to material existence and do not achieve the desired goal of life. If, however, anyone has any material desire to be fulfilled, he had better pray for it to the Supreme Lord, although that is not pure devotion, and he will thus achieve the desired result. In verse 25, Yanti devavrata devan pitrinyanti pitrvrataha bhutani yanti bhutejya yanti madhyajino bhima. Those who worship the demigods will take birth among the demigods. Those who worship the ancestors go to the ancestors. Those who worship ghosts and spirits will take birth among such beings, and those who worship me will live with me. Purport. If one has any desire to go to the moon, the sun, or any other planet, one can attain the desired destination by following specific Vedic principles recommended for that purpose, such as the process technically known as Darsha Purnamasi. These are vividly described in the fruitive activities portion of the Vedas, which recommends a specific worship of demigods situated on different heavenly planets. Similarly, one can attain the Pita planets by performing a specific yajna. Similarly, one can go to many ghostly planets and become a yaksha, raksha, or pishacha. Pishacha worship is called black arts or black magic. There are many men who practice this black art and they think that it is spiritualism, but such activities are completely materialistic. Similarly, a pure devotee who worships the Supreme Personality of Godhead only achieves the planets of Vaikuntha and Krishna Loka without a doubt. It is very easy to understand through this important verse that if by simply worshipping the demigods one can achieve the heavenly planets, or by worshipping the Pitas achieve the Pita planets, or by practicing the black arts achieve the ghostly planets, why can the pure devotee not achieve the planet of Krishna or Vishnu? Unfortunately, many people have no information of these sublime planets where Krishna and Vishnu live, and because they do not know of them, they fall down. Even the impersonalists fall down from the Brahmajyoti. The Krishna consciousness movement is therefore distributing sublime information to the entire human society, to the effect that by simply chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, one can become perfect in this life and go back home, back to Godhead. So it's very interesting here in the purport of verse 24. Srila Prabhupada is explaining that there are different types of yajnas, and it's interesting to note also that yajna means two things. It means sacrifice, and then in the purport Prabhupada is saying it also means Vishnu. So sacrifice and also the object of all sacrifices, which is Lord Vishnu. And in the third chapter of Bhagavad Gita, so I think it's chapter 3, text 9, Yagyarthat karmano nyatra lokoyam karma bandhana tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed, otherwise work causes bondage in this material world. So this is the verse that Srila Prabhupada is referring to here. And the verse is clearly stating that one should only work for satisfying Yajna or Vishnu. Otherwise, work causes bondage in the material world. So we know about the law of karma. And karma basically means you perform an action and it creates a reaction. And whether that action is good or bad, you get the corresponding reaction. And it's interesting, there's a very nice analogy. When it's milking time for the cows, they release the calves, because I think, if my understanding is correct, the proper process is that the calves, they get to drink milk first, and then afterwards, then the milkman, they can come and milk the cows for the rest of the milk. So it's very interesting because they may be kept separate. Actually, you can see it for yourself. You can just go to the Goshala at milking time and you'll see it. When the calves are released, they automatically go to their mothers. They know where the mothers are. The cows know who their calves are, and the cows know who their mothers are. There's no confusion there. Even if there are hundreds of cows and hundreds of calves, they know where to go. It's an automatic thing. Practically, you just have to release the calves, and then they'll go they'll go to where their mothers are. So it's explained in a similar way that whenever an action is performed, the reaction follows, just like the calf follows the mother. It's It's automatic. It's the most natural thing. As soon as an action is performed, there's a corresponding reaction for that. You cannot separate the two. So the only way to not get entangled in action and reaction is to satisfy Vishnu. And it's very interesting here because in this purport, Prabhupada is also giving the actual meaning of Varnashram Dharma, which is Devi Varnashram Dharma. Prabhupada is saying the perfectional form of human civilization known as Varnashram Dharma is specifically meant for satisfying Vishnu. So that is the difference between Devi Varnashram and ordinary Varnashram. It's a very big topic. We can speak for a very long time on this topic and explore it very deeply, but suffice it to say for now that sometimes Prabhupada said Varnashram is the remaining 50% of what he intended to accomplish. So that has become our service to carry out this vision of Srila Prabhupada. And therefore it's very important for us to understand very clearly what is. If we're going to try to establish Varnashram, we have to understand very clearly what it is and what it is not. Both things are very important. What it is it's a system, it's a social system that has a goal. And the goal is, as Prabhupada is saying in this purport, to satisfy Vishnu, to give pleasure to Krishna. The goal of Varnashram is pure devotional service. This is Devi Varnashram. This is the Varnashram that Prabhupada wanted us to establish. And not the ordinary Varnashram. That's not the one that we're trying to realize, to manifest. And it's, like I said, it's a big topic, but I personally, this is my own personal point of view on it, is a lot of the reluctance that we have at the moment to maybe boldly step forward and actually practically manifest Varnashram, practically apply it, and because it involves risks. There's a certain element of risk in there. Is okay, I want to give up my job in the city and move to the countryside and live with devotees, and who knows, will I be able to get along with the devotees or not? What about my maintenance? At least to have some kind of security. I'm living in a city, I have a job, and I'm able to save money for my retirement. And what if I just give that up and live in a rural setting, living off the land? How's it going to work for me and for my family? So all these questions are there, and we're not dismissing them. These are valid concerns. But the point is that there's a certain element of risk involved, and there's a certain amount of reluctance to actually step forward and boldly manifest this vision of Prabhupada. And I believe that this is because it has a lot to do with not understanding thoroughly enough, not understanding Varnashram thoroughly enough. And if we actually understand Devi Varnashram and how it's very clearly distinct from ordinary Varnashram, then we can we'll have more faith, more willingness in to actually take a risk and let's give it a try. This is Prabhupada's desire. This is the founder Acharya's desire. This is what he wants. Let us try to satisfy him. Let us try to please him. Let us do our bit. So now how we go about doing this is a big topic, and I believe it is outside the scope of Bhagavad Gita to us to actually speak about it, but because it's been mentioned in the purport, so we brought it up here. So Krishna is saying, I'm the enjoyer of all sacrifices because I am the Supreme Master. Bhaktaram yagyatapasam sarvalokam maheshwaram. And this is the verse in Bhagavad Gita where Krishna is saying that he's the Supreme Enjoyer and the Master. And less intelligent persons, they worship the demigods, as we've been reading in this chapter. And what happens as a result of that is they fall down to material existence and do not achieve the desired goal of life, is what Prabhupada is saying. And then even the impersonalists, Prabhupada said, they go up to the Brahmajyoti and then they can't stay there because there's no activity, there's no service. And therefore there is no actual happiness, no actual fulfillment and satisfaction, and then they have to come back down. So, it's very interesting to actually ponder the question as to why this is the case. Why is it that we, living entities in this world do not accept Krishna as the enjoyer of all sacrifices? Why is it that living entities, choose to, either be vikarmis, enjoying their senses, or karmakandis, following some Vedic process of, basically, it's a more refined form of sense gratification, demigod worship, or trying to become liberated. I was listening to a series of lectures on Jaiva Dharma, and there was a very interesting point that was brought up in there. It was specifically about the false ego, the nature of the false ego, or what it is really. We know that the Bhagavad Gita is saying, Vina prakriti rashtada, bhumirapo nadovaya, kammano buddhireva cha, ankara iti ame, vina prakriti rashtada. The living entity in the material world is covered by 8 different layers. 5 of them which have to do with our gross body. What are they? Earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And then we have a subtle body, and our subtle body is made up of mind, intelligence, and false ego, ahankara, false ego. So if you actually look at these 8 elements and you rank them in terms of being gross or subtle, you'll see that the most subtle of all of them is the false ego. Earth is the grossest, and then more subtle than earth is water, and more subtle than that is fire, and then air, and then even more subtle than that is ether. Actually, ether is very difficult for us to even perceive. But then even more subtle than that is the mind. And higher than that, intelligence, and even more subtle is the false ego, the ahankara. So generally when we speak about false ego in devotee circles, we use the term to denote different things. Sometimes devotees having some difficulties with each other, or that's your false ego. We take it to mean false pride, which it is. I mean, it's an aspect of it. But really if you actually ponder deeply what is ahankara, what is the false ego, it is the result of wanting to enjoy separately from Krishna. It's basically the result of wanting to be God. So there was a time when the living entity was with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I don't want to get into this question of the origin of the jiva. This is not for Bhagavad Gita class. It's not even for I'm not even qualified to speak on this. So we're not going to get into where the jiva came from. But let's, for now, stick to the premise that we weren't here. There was a time when we were not in the material world. And the living entity desires to enjoy separately from Krishna. It desires to basically be God, to be Krishna, and that cannot happen in God's kingdom. So, because the Lord is very kind, He provides us with a facility where we can actually try to be small gods, where we can try to play God. So he says, fine, you can't do this here because, the spiritual world is a place for service. So here you go. This is a material world, and that's where you can try out your experiment of trying to be the Lord. So we get sent here, and in order to be able to do that, the living entity has to be covered. We have to become covered. Why? Because the living entity's natural position is to always be a servant, is to remember, is to be aware, is to be conscious that he or she is a servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Jivera Surabhoy Nityara Krishna Das. This is the nature of the Jiva. So the Jiva, if the Jiva does not forget that it is Nityara Krishna Das, it's not possible to come here and to try to enjoy separately from Krishna. So we have to be covered so that we can go ahead with this experiment of trying to enjoy separately. And therefore, the covering, the very first covering is the ahankara, the false ego. And it is due to this covering that the jiva forgets who it is, that it is actually a tiny particle of God, a spiritual being, a particle of God, and it begins to identify with matter, aham mameti. The jiva begins to think that this body is who I am. I am the body, and everything pertaining to this body is mine, aham mameti. That's the actual meaning of the false ego. And the reason why, like there's an expression, it's a French expression, raison d'être, it's used in English also, which means the very reason for the existence of the false ego is the desire to enjoy, to be the enjoyer, to be the enjoyer of the material world, to be the enjoyer of matter, to enjoy separately from Krishna. And to be able to enjoy, one must also control. Because if you want to enjoy something, you have to have some amount of control, right? If you want to enjoy eating something very palatable, you need to be able to have that much control that you can go and purchase that item and cook it and then place it on your table. If you have no control over that, it's not possible for you to enjoy anything. So, we wanted to be the Ishwaras, we wanted to be the controllers, we wanted to be the enjoyers, and that's why we get covered by the false ego. And now I'm getting to the essence of, the crux of the point, which is this. We join the Krishna consciousness movement. We become sadhakas. We put on tilak and tulsi neck beads, and we take up this process of sadhana, and we're doing all these things that we've been taught. And we sometimes, I will not, I don't mean to be judgmental, so I'm not speaking for you, I'm speaking for myself. We go for years and years and years practicing sadhana and not feeling the result of sadhana. Actually, we feel it takes a long time, or whatever happiness, satisfaction, fulfillment, or bliss we may get from sadhana is those moments of ecstasy are few and far between. They're very rare. Just like a materialistic person, one God brother of mine was using this example. He said, just like materialistic people, we have to work very hard to get a little bit of happiness. But actually, even us as sadhakas, we're working for Krishna. We're working for the satisfaction of Krishna. It's true. This is what the Prabhupada says, and this is what Prabhupada taught us, and we're doing it. But even for us, the actual experience of the bliss of spiritual life, Kevala Ananda Kanda, it's actually, for myself, I know I can say it's very seldom. We go through what we call this, what is it called? The dark night of the soul. think this is the expression. Why? Why? And this is the question we need to ask ourselves. Why is it that I'm going year after year after year of chanting Hare Krishna without higher taste? Why? Because we have taken up the process of sadhana, but since time immemorial, we are so deeply conditioned to want to be the enjoyer and to want to be the controller that we take that mentality and we come into the process of sadhana with that. And that basically means it's like there's a very nice nice story actually. Generally, in cities were constructed along bodies of water, either the ocean or huge rivers, because that's how trade could happen. You know, traditionally, ships would be able to navigate up to those places, and then trade would be happening. So you will generally find that big cities were constructed either near the sea or on riverbanks, along the banks of rivers. So in this way, there was once a very wealthy merchant who was traveling up the river, and usually what they would do is they would wait for the tide to come in, meaning that the tide comes in from the sea, and at that moment it becomes easier to navigate upwards along the river. Otherwise it's a little difficult because the current is coming this way and you have to go in the opposite direction, so it's difficult. So you take help from the tide, the incoming tide, which makes it easier to navigate. So they were expert sailors, so they would wait for the right moment when the tide would come in, and then they would navigate. So once there was a situation like this where they were waiting for the tide and the tide wasn't coming, so everybody in the ship they were resting, and then at some point the tide started coming in. Must have been around maybe 11 o'clock or midnight, and then everybody woke up in a frenzy. Get up, get up, get up! Let's start rowing because the tide is coming in now. Let's go. We have to get moving. So everybody started rowing, and they rowed and rowed till morning, 5-6 hours. And then the owner, the wealthy merchant, he asked them, so where have we reached? Because usually you can tell by looking at the scenery on the riverbank. It can, by that you can gauge where you're at. Are you still, how far are you from your destination, or have you already reached? And when the sky started clearing and they could see the scenery, they were seeing that the scenery hasn't changed. We're still where we were last night. And so the merchant, he was angry. He said, "What are you talking about? This is not possible. How can you row for 6 hours and not get anywhere and still be in the same place? Are you crazy?" And they said, "No, sir. We're speaking the truth. Please come see for yourself." So he came up to the deck and he looked, and sure enough, they hadn't moved even an inch. What was the reason? The anchor was still down. They rowed for 6 hours, but they never actually lifted up the anchor. So they couldn't move. They were stuck in the same place. This process of sadhana is extremely powerful. Particularly these 5 Mahasadhana, which Srila Rupa Goswami has given us. Bhagavat Shravan, Shri Murti Seva, Mathuravas, Nam Sankirtan, and Sadhu Sangha, the association with devotees, worship of the deity, of the Lord, chanting the holy name, associating with devotees, and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. And it is explained that these practices they are so powerful that they can very quickly take the practitioner to the stage of pure devotional service, to the stage of bhava actually. They are so potent that even a slight bit of contact with any of these five, you don't even need all five of them, you need only one of them. So the question then we can ask ourselves is, we've been practicing all these five items of devotional service for so many years, then why are we not moving forward? Or why is our progress so slow? And this is the answer. The answer is, well, two things really. You can say one is that there are, whatever the Shastra says, like we were reading in Nectar of Devotion last night, that even spending a few seconds, it's not an exaggeration because this is the Shastra, it's the 13th chapter of Nectar of Devotion, and Prabhupada is quoting different Shastras. And I think this is from Padma Purana, if I'm not mistaken. And Prabhupada is quoting in Nectar of Devotion, and he's saying a few seconds of being in Mathura Mandal, of being in the Holy Dham, few seconds is enough to make one a pure devotee. So we're spending a lot more than few seconds here. Why are we not? Why am I not tasting the bliss of pure devotional service? So it's usually two things. One is offenses. The varieties of aparads, Nama aparad, there are 10 offenses to the holy name. Seva aparad, there's 32 types of offenses when it comes to worshipping the deity. Jiva aparad, unnecessarily causing pain to any living entity. And Vaishnava aparad, criticizing other devotees or not dealing with them properly. So offenses are one aspect of offenses are one aspect of our shortcomings, what limits our limitations, what prevents us from making spiritual advancements as quickly as we potentially could. And it's very interesting because in that same chapter, in the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada actually gives the answer to that. But before we get to that, I was saying it's one aspect. Offenses is one aspect. The other aspect is that we're not fully giving up the enjoyer mentality, the mentality of wanting to enjoy and of wanting to control. And it's very deeply rooted. So, we shouldn't be too harsh on ourselves either. This is something that we have been carrying with us for hundreds, millions of lifetimes. So it's not that overnight we can simply change our consciousness and become free from contamination. But the fact of the matter is that this is the work that needs to happen if we want to experience the result of our sadhana, if we want to feel that we're tangibly making spiritual advancement. And both are related. So it's very interesting because in that same chapter of Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada then gives you the solution. So do you want to know the solution to overcoming offenses? I don't think you want to know. It doesn't seem like you're very interested. So, but you do. This is coming from Prabhupada. This is Prabhupada's own words. And when I read it last night, I became so happy because I felt, yes, Prabhupada is giving us actually what we need to know. And this is it. Prabhupada says something very simple. It's in one sentence. It is by cultivating the service attitude. Offenses, specifically chapter 13 is about the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. The whole chapter is about the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And even from the beginning of the chapter, Srila Prabhupada, he speaks about offenseless chanting, the glories of offenseless chanting. And then there's one point that Prabhupada makes. He says, one whose senses are not purified cannot chant offenselessly. This is actually from the Bhagavatam. It's not that even Prabhupada is, it's not that Prabhupada is just even saying that himself, he's actually quoting the Bhagavatam. The shloka in the Bhagavatam says that the holy name cannot be chanted offenselessly or purely until the mind is purified, and the mind cannot be purified until eating, sleeping, mating and defending are not purified. Unless one is not pure in eating, sleeping, mating, defending, he cannot be pure in mind, and unless one is not pure in mind, he cannot chant the holy name purely or offenselessly. This is the Bhagavatam, this is the shloka. So Prabhupada is referring to that and saying that he's speaking about the glories of the offenseless chanting, and then he says that this is what it takes to be able to chant offenselessly. And then he gives the solution. The solution is to cultivate the service attitude toward the Lord and toward the Lord's devotees. Toward the Lord and toward the Lord's devotees. Why? Because towards the Lord's devotees, Vaishnava Seva is what leads to Namruchi. There's Vaishnava Seva. When Sanatana Goswami asked Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what is religion? And Mahaprabhu here replied, he said, only three things constitute religion: Vaishnava Seva, Namruchi and Jivadoya. Serving the Vaishnavas, taste for the holy name, and compassion for other living entities. And actually these three principles, they're related. One leads to the other. It is from Vaishnava Seva that we can get taste for the holy name. And the illustration, the example that illustrates this is in the Bhagavatam, 1st canto, 5th chapter. This is the story of Narad Muni. You can actually read through the verses and you'll see that Narad Muni is actually telling you the story of his own spiritual advancement. And if you examine those verses carefully, you will see how Narad Muni is actually describing how he actually progresses through the different stages. He tells his own story. He said, but the first thing that Narad Muni did was he served the advanced souls, the self-realized souls, the Bhaktivedantas. It was on the strength of that service, honoring their remnants and serving them immediately, that he became blessed to actually start his bhajan, to start his practice of devotional service. And when he started his practice of devotional service, then Narad Muni tells you his own story. He said, very quickly I became freed from the lower modes of passion and ignorance, and I became firmly established in goodness, which means the stage of nishtha. This is being established in goodness is nishtha. And then he said, I acquired a taste for chanting, and he said there was a time when he became addicted to hearing and chanting the glories of the Lord. This is happening in the forest. Narad Muni, when his mother passed away, he left and he went to the forest. And he started his spiritual practices, and this is what he's telling you he went through. And being addicted to hearing and chanting the glories means ashakti. And if you look at the purport carefully, Srila Prabhupada, he says that Narad Muni, he gets darshan of Krishna, a fleeting darshan. It's called Spurti darshan. And in the purport, Prabhupada is saying that Narad Muni had attained the stage of bhava. And that's when Krishna told him, you will not see me again in this lifetime, but because you have not perfected your devotional service, but in the next lifetime we will be together like that. So that's the story, and this is how. So everything started by serving the self-realized souls, by serving the Bhaktivedanta. So Vaishnava Seva. So coming back to the point that Prabhupada is making, this is how we can progress tangibly towards offenseless chanting. It is by developing the service attitude. Why? Because the service attitude actually takes care of both things at the same time. It takes care of, service attitude will take care of the offenses, because it will protect us from making offenses. If we are always thinking ourselves the servant, there is even no question of aparad. A servant never thinks that he's better than anyone else, or that he's a very big person. A servant is always in a humble position. If we're firmly fixed in that, then it's practically automatic that we become protected from offenses. Of course, we have to read the Shastra and be aware of what the offenses are and carefully avoid them. That's actually part of developing the consciousness of the servant. So it takes care of that, of avoiding the offenses. It also takes care of the material attachments. The anchor that is still in the riverbed, holding us back. Even though we are rowing and rowing and rowing year after year, this service attitude actually takes care of that. Why? It's a very profound point, because service attitude is the direct opposite of ahankara. Think about it carefully. It is the direct opposite of the false ego. The false ego means that I want to be the enjoyer and I want to be the controller so that I can enjoy. And seva bhav, well, the service attitude, is the direct opposite of false ego. What is it? It is the real ego. Prabhupada says there is false ego and real ego. So service attitude is real ego. Why is it real ego? Because it is actually part of the soul. Developing the service attitude means that the soul begins to blossom. You're creating the condition where the soul begins to blossom. The soul's true nature begins to manifest. It is through service attitude, because actually this is what the soul does. The soul has no other purpose for its existence. The soul has. There's actually a verse in one of the scriptures where it's such a powerful verse, and it's so beautiful. It's glorifying the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, and the verse says that the purpose for the existence of the soul. In other words, we exist for only this chanting. We actually don't even exist for any other thing. The soul's purpose of existence is chanting of the holy names. And what is the meaning of chanting? Please engage me in service. The meaning of chanting is seva bhava. So, cultivating a service attitude is basically you're giving fuel to your sadhana. Because sadhana is not meant to be mechanical. We are not meant to simply repeat the names. We are meant to honor the presence of the holy names in our lives in a deeply personal way. The name is Krishna. In the Nectar of Devotion, again, these verses that Srila Prabhupada is quoting, these verses in glorification of the holy name, and there's one of those verses where the Lord says that, please know without a doubt, I'm paraphrasing, I cannot recite this verse by memory, but he's saying, please know without a doubt that whoever chants my name is with me. He is with me. He is in my association. Krishna is saying this. This is Krishna's own words. Whoever is chanting my name is with me because I am not different from my name. Whenever we pick up our bead bag in the morning and we're sitting down to chant, the Hare Krishna mantra is Radha Krishna, or Krishna Balaram, or whoever is your, you feel attracted to. The Lord is the name. And when we pick up our bead bag and we begin chanting, the Lord is there with you in the room. He is present. He is not somewhere else. But we fail to give him our attention. And therefore, because he's a person, he feels hurt. He feels neglected. Actually, in the Harinam Chintamani, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he asks Haridas Thakur, he requests Haridas Thakur to glorify the holy names. And at first, Srila Haridas Thakur is reluctant. He doesn't want to speak out of his humility. But Mahaprabhu, he insists, no, I want to hear from you. I want to hear the glories of the holy names from you. You are the Namacharya. So then Haridas Thakur, he begins to speak. And when he begins to glorify the holy names, one of the first things that Haridas Thakur says about the holy names is, not different from Krishna, possesses all the 64 qualities that Krishna possesses. They are there in the holy names. And one of the words that Haridas Thakur uses is conscious. The holy names are conscious. They are living persons. They are real persons, living, conscious, as opposed to dead matter. And matter is Asat, Achit, Nirananda. It's temporary, it's not conscious, and there's no bliss in matter. But spirit is of a completely different nature. It is Satchitananda. It is eternal, cognizant, conscious, aware, alive, and full of bliss. That is the nature of spirit. We are like that. We are also made of the same substance. The holy name is also of the same substance. It is fully spiritual. It is Krishna. The name is conscious. It's a person. It's with us in the morning when we pick up our weed bag and we're chanting. The holy names are there. So it's not just a matter of mechanically repeating the names. We have to, in our sadhana, we have to come to the realization that we're dealing with persons who are present with us right now. And we have to therefore welcome and respect them and treat them the way they should be actually treated. And therefore chanting the holy names is a 24-hour business. It is 2 hours of chanting and 24 hours and remaining 22 hours of cultivating the service attitude. Seva bhava. Because it is through this service attitude that we can protect ourselves from the offenses to the holy names. It is through the service attitude that we can train our stubborn minds to give up the enjoyer mentality, to give up the controller mentality. So service attitude in the remaining 22 hours pays off the next morning in the 2 hours of japa that we chant. And the 2 hours of japa will simply then reinforce that we are the servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And then we start our day after our chanting again in the Seva Bhava. And this is